When I was in first year out of the institute, I know I have to get it right. Like I was trying to see like how can I make sure that every minute of these 2 years or every day of these 2 years is going to be meaningful for them, and really setting high expectations and like pushing them to work hard and things. But then what happened is often I was confronted with situations where what they bring from home is very like discouraging to the kind of atmosphere I wanted in class. Like I cannot expect my students to sit down and recite tables or do a worksheet when say they've not had breakfast. The teacher would suffice in a school like Akanksha, but it obviously wasn't enough because there were a lot more at home which has to be addressed first. I think it's safe to assume that more than 85% of all our students come from like single room spaces with a family of easily at least 4 or more than 4. So that means that after school, if students are expected to do a certain kind of work, even if it's related to school, there is no real there's no real space for the students to sit down and do their work. Like everything is happening in one room, so you see the TV is constantly on, and also the community they come from, right? It's the priorities in that community is very different from what priorities we want from our students. In fact, it's very contrasting, and often it becomes this, that the messages we give our students, they get kind of opposite messages at home. So the challenge is to understand it from the student's perspective, that we are getting two messages. How do we, it's not about the messages that we are giving, but we are actually getting them into a position where they're able to see this and then make a decision that which message is actually more meaningful for them. The difference between education and learning, if I look at the entire fellowship as an education to offer, then I'm trying to put a kind of a limitation in my approach and what I think is possible. I want to go beyond that, and actually I don't want to give my students an education. I want them to be learners. Like it can happen at any time, at any place, depending on how conscious and aware they are of learning and what is it that they want to take in the end of the day. And what is it they want to take in the end of the day is, again, goes back to what I want about them. I keep telling them that 10 years, 15 years from now, they will be actually where I am today, and they will get an opportunity to make the decisions which would, impact people around them. And at that point of time, will they be prepared for that? If they have to be prepared for something like that, what are the necessary steps they have to take before that? That could be academics, as in like completing college, or getting into this formal route, or how is it that you take ownership for your own work and drive your own learning? Yeah. Especially for my students, considering the background they come from, right? I do not want them to be dependent on anybody. I do not want them to have an excellent the idea of their having an excellent education is possible only if there is a committed teacher there. I don't want it to be limited by that idea. I want them to have a learning irrespective of whether the teacher is there. So throughout my 2 years, having this vision that, how do I push that independence? How do I make them independent learners? The subject which I teach, math, I've only used it as a tool to drive this vision. Like how can I use this as a subject, the subject as a tool to make sure that my students are able to correct their own mistakes, they're able to understand that making mistakes is fine, because if they are aware of it, it's actually a learning experience. It's how you decide to look at your mistake. So making mistakes is always like welcomed in class as long as we correct those mistakes. And eventually everything which I worked around for my students, it could be the mentorship program, it could be the kind of big goal we have set, is basically to broaden that understanding of learning, saying it's not limited to textbook, it's not limited to a